so excited to be back with Nellie Davis. Nellie is a small business owner of Outsiders Hair Salon and Studio. She started her business as a place where people could feel comfortable no matter their background. She's a member of the Walker River Paiute Tribe and is also a TEDx speaker about building community value and grassroots urban planning. Now, despite that introduction, which is amazing, there's also a considerable amount of power, feminine energy, and conversation surrounding land, medicine, healing, feminine and masculine energy. We can go on and on, but we're back here for a second conversation with her. Please listen to the previous podcast episode where we got to meet Nellie, and then let's see what pops up today.
I mean, I'm so excited to dive deeper into the conversation about healing. I think this is a powerful episode for people to listen to. We all are in need of healing, I bet.
Yes. Yeah. No, I think that, and a lot of the work that I do is in, generational healing, ancestral healing. And I think oftentimes, people associate that with, with a native culture, because of the effects of colonization and how those things that we still carry within our communities even today, through the barriers that are uniquely faced within Native communities as a result of colonization. But we can look at this in this form of that's just a means of predatory, this predatory energy that was carried to Turtle Island from broadly European communities as well. We can look at this, how we were talking about in the witch trials, in in tribal communities within, many cultures in Celtic tradition. And I mean, the list goes on. So many of us, I think, have this yearning, right? This yearning to connect with the land in a deeper way, because this is what is true to each of us. This is what connects each of us. We can have all these conversations around our differences, what keeps us away from each other, but really at our core, at our core needs, even with land and nourishment, with water, those are what all connect us. And so, I think I think part of it is that if we look at the wave that came forward, it's like indigenous cultures have maybe been able to hold on to that knowledge a little bit longer. And so, still trying to have that within our communities, as a representation of our culture, which I think is why it's so attractive to people to want to adopt that as their own. But I think where the power comes in is finding what is true to you, what's true to your lineage, what do they call a healer or, a shaman? What do they call that in your language? What were the practices, the rituals that they did or do around the earth-based practices in your culture?
Well, and can we talk for a second about just the words we're using? Because in some contexts, healing is I've got a scrape and it needs to heal, right? Or I've got an ailment, I'm going to go to the doctor and get medicine. What we're talking about, healing means something very different. And medicine, I would suggest, means anything that heals or helps heal. So when you talk about healing, can you kind of give us some context around your use of that word?
Yeah. So I think healing has a lot of connotations with it for sure, around being a Band-Aid or a fix-all, whereas healing is a process, it's a journey, and it's comprised of all the things that make up our well-being. It's like we talked about in the last episode, it's your spirit, it's your mind, it's your body, it's your emotion, it's your heart. It's all these things in harmony within each other that make up our well-being. And so when we think about, in terms of healing, we have to heal on many different levels, because in the work that I do, in my body work, it's the ailments are just a manifestation physically of what's happening within us, either on an emotional level, on a spiritual level, on energetic level, even, you know, these things that we carry that are in stagnation, you know, that are just essentially expressing themselves through physical form.
We talked a little on the break that I resonate really well with this conversation. I'm Irish heritage, and I have an energy healer in my family. And while the terminology, while even some of the practice is different, the level of respect for the earth, the level of connection to the earth, and the recognition that the earth is the energy source that we truly need to heal was seemingly a common theme. I'm very connected to that energy, but I also find, I think because I'm so open to it, I find callings. I get callings, and I think a lot of people probably have urges. Even I'm thinking an urge as simple as the urge to take your shoes off when you're on grass or in sand. There's this urge to connect our bodies back to the earth, right? So I love that you said that we all likely come from a space in our generations going back that have that deep-rooted connection to the earth and having that sense of healing and finding that within ourselves. Why is that so important to listen? I think sometimes it's probably hard to listen to those urges, or maybe we haven't heard those urges before. How do we tap into that? How do we listen to that?
Yeah, I think, you know, you make a really great point, because it is, you know, when I first started, you know, getting into like energetic modalities, you know, I think the first thing that was available to me was like, oh, you need to get your Reiki certification. So like I went through the Reiki certification to get my master's. But I realized as I like circled back into my own, you know, into my own knowing, even into my own culture, I found that like we have our own form of like laying on hands, and we don't call them chakras, we call them energy centers. And they, you know, they don't go, you know, in, you know, just one way within our body. They expand beyond. And so, you know, there's so much synergy in these things where it's like, you can call it whatever you want, you know, like whatever it is within your culture. I believe essentially we're talking about the same thing. Yes. You know, we're talking about the universal energy that exists within all things, this sense of animism, that spirit energy, whatever you want to call it, is in all things, you know? And so that's where I think that broad term of like even medicine, like the medicine is like, it's what we carry. It's what, you know, is that like, you know, we were saying like in terms of like, we call them puha places, you know, where there's places in the land that, you know, emit this like, I mean, this frequency that you're like, this place has power. Like I can, you know, like I've been to, you know, waterfalls in Iceland where like I was behind the waterfall and I was feeling this like, and I just was crying at like, this is so power. I feel you. Like, I feel you, Mother Earth. Like this, you know, where it's like, you have those moments where you're just struck with that power, you know? And I think that, you know, we can look at like, you know, there's like those, you know, those little sayings that are like, the sun is medicine, like, you know, water is medicine, like nourishment is like love is medicine. Like, you know, it's all these things that make us, that bring healing is a form of medicine. And it's not what we think is like, in terms of like just taking a pill, you know, it's like all these things that are available to us. Like, we feel so fortunate to be in the Great Basin, you know, where like we have so much medicine available to us.
Can you talk a little bit about plant medicine? We mentioned that in our last episode, and I think our listeners probably have a pretty wide, you know, spectrum of exposure to plant medicine. Maybe some none at all, others maybe quite a bit. But give us some context or some info on plant medicine.
Yeah. So in plant medicine, like, you're absolutely right. It has a very broad, and a lot of people, when we think of like plant medicine, they think of like the master plant allies, right? Like they think of these like transformative experiences that they're going to have with, ayahuasca or, whatever it may be.
But pot.
Yeah,
I'm thinking of plants. We see that there's probably no more plant left in that medicine, but they put the picture aloe. They put a picture of it on the bottle, and
and that's that's really interesting because the thing is like we actually have like natural DMT within our body. We can produce our own medicine in that transformative experience without using master plant allies, and I'm finding that a lot of people are, working with the plants in a more abusive way. They're overusing them. They're, and a lot of, the people that I work with are asking like people to let the jungle rest, because it's like we're going and we're actually like changing the spirit of the plant, and it's getting to this place where if we continue to be on this path of abusing the master plant medicines, like they're going to start asking of us, because the messages that you're using, when you're working with these plants, and any plant in a ceremonial way is sacred. And so, if you're using it recreationally, or you're like, I need this as like a fix it, it's like, you're not communing with the plant in reciprocity. You're not working with it in a good way.
You're asking way too much.
You're asking of it, And so when it's giving you these messages, and you're not taking action on it, that's when it comes into, into like more of an abusive relationship, And so we can have these same connections with, the spirits of the plant that are not in a like, hallucinogenic or altering our, state of consciousness. Like we can get healing from other plants, like there's like, I like to think of it as like different personalities, like, and when you go and you like meet someone, like, you're getting to know them, right? You're getting to know like what they bring to the table, and
like plants are the same way,
so cool. Yeah, plants are the same way. Just sitting with them, communing with them, like watching them, but then also, like we can do things where, if we're feeling, like overstimulated, like something as simple as like chamomile, like we can work with, so it's like these things that where we would normally be like, I need to take this, realizing that, the pharmaceutical companies are altering synthetic versions of what the constituents of that natural plant medicine are that we have available to us in its natural form, so when we're able to work with it in a good way and use the plants from the land, like it's that much more powerful.
I'll tell you, nothing gets me through a moment of stress and chaos like a cup of chamomile tea, good chamomile, and laying in the grass and just taking a deep breath. So, and in no way are we telling people stop all your medicines and just you're going to just heal yourself with some. No, but take notice of what you're trying to heal, and maybe take a look at, are you healing it? I think that's the deep question here, right? Are you healing it? And is there a way that the earth is able, that you and your connection to the earth are able to heal?
Every day you hear about people making money by investing in IPOs and startups. But what about you? These kinds of investments are simply not available to Main Street investors. At Rowe Capital Group, we are committed to providing access to strategic, early-stage, primarily low-market correlated investment opportunities. Accredited investors go to rowecapitalgroup.com for more information. Rowe Capital Group, empowering your financial journey.
And as you're healing, you are building something. And in one of the smoothest transitions in podcast history, we're going to link this back to Women Talking Finance, because you're building spiritual capital.
Yes.
Ooh. Let's talk about that.
Yours was way better than my transition, so we'll go with yours.
They're going to edit out
You're
whatever they don't
smooth.
like, which makes me happy. If they don't like it, it goes.
Like it.
Let's talk about building, for real, spiritual capital. What does that mean? What does it look like? Why is it so important? Why is it a valuable thing to have?
Well, I think when we can build, our capacity for spirituality, we show up differently in the world and what we do, and money is just a form of energy, it really is. And it's like, money is not, it's not good or bad, right? It's the intention that we put behind it. So when you alter it and you have this, control or greed or power, like that shifts the energy of money, but it's not the actual thing itself. It's the intention that's behind it, so
We've given pieces of paper a huge amount of power.
Yes, absolutely. And, so that's where I think of, in the form of abundance, in the form of wealth, in the form of, leadership, like our spiritual capacity contributes to that, because it's all about how, our flow and our intention is, and then in creating that action behind the intention, in alignment with that. So it changes everything, where, like in a lot of medicine wheels, like we carry spirit in the north, which is, that's where it, brings everything full circle, and so I think that it's really, it's like that is our connection to, whatever higher power you believe in, but it's also our deepest connection to ourself. So when we can show up as our best self, our most authentic self, our most, whatever you want to say, like whatever words resonate with you, that's how we can really change the way that we do business.
I love this conversation in that you're able to say it's whatever speaks to you, whatever kind of is your natural pathway towards energy work or exploration, right? Because it's not necessarily just this one segment of energy work or energy healing. There's so many ways, but if you're carrying around these deep wounds, or just in general you need healing, or you've been the person that you think you're supposed to be, the person that society has told you that you're supposed to be, you're not operating at your highest and best self, and it's doing yourself and the world a disservice because you're not being authentic, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, for those folks who are in that space, conversations like this can activate that, and it's activating your shadow. It's activating the parts of yourself that are, repressed, or that you may not have just the capacity to go to right now, which I think is really important that we begin as part of our healing process to look at that, because I believe in, a lot of, like this, I guess like in a spiritual sense, there's this like love and light mentality, which is like, absolutely, we need that. But we also have to acknowledge the duality that exists in all things, which is those more denser spaces. They are the deeper wounds that we carry through our childhood, through, our ancestry, through, like our deepest fears, our judgments, like those things, like those are the parts of ourselves that we actually have to look at and be willing to step into that of like, I'm not going to look away from this of myself because it makes me feel uncomfortable. I'm going to get curious. I'm going to ask myself, and I'm going to do so with compassion, but I know that I have to navigate through that in order to have whatever, that love and light looks like. You have to have both, and that's where it's like, what can I do to go into these deeper spaces and bring the light there where is needed? how can I bring that light that I carry innately and bring it into those spaces and shine a light of like, I see you. I know that you exist. I'm not going to dismiss you. I'm going to integrate you in to be a part of me that doesn't have that same power, because one of the things that, we talk about from a place of shame, just saying it out loud changes it, right? When someone's able to be like, I see you. I may not be able to go there with you. I haven't experienced the same thing that you have, but I know that feeling that's behind that. I know I've felt that before, and I see you, like that acknowledgement changes everything.
It creates a really beautiful level of compassion and relatability.
Yes.
And I think too, one of my favorite teachings is saying one in me, rather than giving things a label, like that's good, that's bad, that's light, that's dark, whatever. One in me has shame. One in me has fear, or one in me is fearful. One in me is also very brave, because we all have these different parts. And rather than hiding the ones that have been deemed or we deem bad with judgment, putting them away, you just call them forward and it's like, everyone's welcome here. Everyone's got all these different parts. And the power of that, I think, can be very, very healing.
Yes, absolutely.
I feel like a lot of listeners are probably listening to this and feeling, I'm having so many aha moments in this. But I think they probably joined or started listening to our podcast to deal with something external, something tangible, their finances, right? They want a specific tip or whatever it is. And I feel like this is one of the most valuable conversations we could have, because that internal work, you are not going, especially if you're in almost like the cycle that we talked about of lack or fear or whatever it is, or abundance. I mean, it could be, but if you're in a cycle and typically it's just specifically a negative cycle, that's not going to cure anything until you do that deep work inside. And that's the hard work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the hardest work.
It's
and
scary.
it's never ending.
It's never ending. Yeah, it's not a quick Band-Aid.
It's not a quick, it's like you make $1 million and you're in the club and like, that's not going to fix it, And I think, like one of the most important things that, I try to reiterate is that it's like, take what you need, like leave what you don't, If there's anything that you after hearing, these sessions, it's like, all of it is an extension, it's an exterior, either validation or, something that we have been programmed to believe creates part of our worth, but it's like when you shed that, when you lay that down, all you have is this, so when you're doing that deep inner work, that everything else will be an expression of that.
I'm so curious to know, on a really, bringing this back to like what the bulk of our listeners may initially be tuning in for, how does this or how has this changed what you personally invest in?
Well, for me, I think it's, a big part of that was getting my business, like the foundation, the structure, the form, all of that, like getting my business to a place of success. That was like, it was running itself. Like we were just like in the groove. Right. And, and then I realized like how much of that was at the sacrifice of like me and raising my son, me and my well-being, taking care of myself, me and having time, like feeling guilty for taking a vacation, like feeling guilty for taking time off because I was physically ill, those things where I'm like, wow, my perception of what I think of success is so skewed, so now it's like, in coming back to my own and coming back to like being that middle pillar and like always, like checking in with myself of like doing like a body scan of like, does this feel good for me? Like, is this in alignment with what, like what my values are, but also like not just a job, but like my purpose, like, is this in alignment with what my purpose is? Like my great work. And for me, that was like, I value time way more. I value connection way more. I value community way more. It's like, but when I look at the sense of like what my core values are, all of those notions are in alignment with that, So it's like, I think when you're in that flow and you're doing things that are based on like, I know that this is something that I am willing to fight for. Like, I'm willing to fight for these things, like for my time, for my well-being, for my community. I'm willing to fight for these things. So I know I care about it, and that to me is like, when you're in that flow and in alignment with what is true, the other things come forward. Because you're opening yourself up to be in that space, like that sweet spot, so you're like, wow, all these things that like we're having wealth, we're having abundance, we're having connection, like we're having like support in all these areas. Like, and I'm also doing things that feel good for me and feel good for my team, feel good for my community. Like, it's like that, it's that ripple effect of, being in alignment and then like the expression of that alignment.
I just had like the biggest light bulb of like, are we working so hard to be a success for everyone else, for everybody else to see us as a success, that we're sacrificing what it means to actually be a success for ourselves? Because everything you said, I was like, yep, do that. I felt bad because I had a stomach bug, last week, and I missed half a day of work. I'm like, oh my gosh, what a failure. Who does that? Who misses half a day? So, I mean, and it's my company.
Right.
And I'm sitting here beating myself
is like
up.
all the pressure that we put on ourselves to be that person, And I think that that's really like, when you start doing that deeper work, like we talked about, it's like you're able to come from a different place where you're like, I'm just going to trust that I'm going to be provided for. Like I'm going to have this deeper trust that, I'm going to have everything I need, because we do, we do. It's all here for us, but it's changing our mindset to be in that space, to accept that goodness in.
So for our listeners that some of this is new or a reminder, and they're thinking, I need to tap into this. I need more. This episode what got my juices flowing, and I'm ready to dive in. What would you say are some entry-level steps for people to take to do some of this healing work? Are there resources? Are there basic practices that people can get into?
Yeah, I mean, I think just having space to explore that, which I mean, I know I recognize is a privilege to have space to be able to do deep work. When we, have folks who are in a space of survival, that it's not as feasible, number one, but it's also, not as approachable for everyone to be able to explore this work. But if it's available to you, setting aside, time for you to be able to do that, to have contemplative practice, to have body movement, to spend time in nature. And really for me, I think what was like a big, like a big personal aha moment was when I started like defining what my values were, but on a deeper level of like, how does that relate to me in my I am? Like who am I at my core? Like what do I stand for? And so for me, that was going through of like making a list of all the things that I guess like identify with, but then I was going back through that list, and all the things that were outside of myself, I crossed off, like I am a business owner, but that doesn't make me who I am, like I am this person, but that doesn't make me who I am. That's an expression of who I am. So at my core, what does that look like? Going deeper into those things that we label ourselves or that we identify, and like, what's like talking about medicine, like what's the medicine in that, because I may be like, oh, I'm an activist. Okay, we could be an activist, but like at its core, what does that mean? Like, okay, well, I'm community driven. Okay, well, I'm community driven, but like, what does that mean at its core? I'm a connector. Okay, like why is connection so important? Like really like peeling past these layers to be like, well, where does this, like, where does it come from? Like if there's other factors that have come in of like these ways that I identify, I think as young people, like we're really not given a lot of opportunity to explore that, like we really don't have like rite of passage anymore in the way that we did traditionally of like, what is it that is like uniquely yours? What are you going to contribute to the world as your gift, as your medicine, and like, how can we as a community support that so that you can integrate in and like find your place among us so that you don't have to feel like you have to do this thing that isn't meant for you or do this thing like just to feel a sense of belonging. It's like, how can we acknowledge like what it is that you bring, and what it is that you bring, and then how we can create this interdependence of like collaboration of like to where we're all doing what we do, but working towards a commonality that essentially is for the greater good. So like, how do we get to that place? And I think a big part of it is like allowing for that exploration of like who it is that we actually are, beyond these things that we have taken on, or that have been infringed on us, that we've been told are who we are.
Beyond what it says on our business card.
Yes, exactly.
Like that's our identity.
Yes. And like, and holding on to that, I am like, as you're doing these, going deeper into shadow work, of like, doing, things like trauma maps and genetic maps of like, I mean, you can go so deep into these spaces where it's like, you can look at something like a core wound that has been expressed in your family. And then you find that it's like, it's not just yours. It was your mother's. Oh, but it wasn't just your mother's. Like this actually comes from like 3 or 4 generations back that has been carried through that, So it's like when we can look at that and recognize it of saying like, I'm not willing to turn away from the things that make me uncomfortable. We can look at those parts to be the cycle breaker. We can say it ends with me. I'm going to bring in the healing that needs to happen for not only myself, but for everyone around me in the way that I show up, So I think it's really about just getting curious and exploring ourselves on a deeper level in both aspects, in our light and our shadow, and then merging those two together to be in balance.
Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you.
I don't have enough ability to express gratitude for what you've shared with us and our listeners.
Please check out our TikTok Women TF podcast and go to our website, rowcapitalgroup.com. We've got a section for the WTF podcast with all of our show notes and resources, and it's a great way to just stay in contact with us.
Thank you so much for listening. And again, Nellie, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you. Pijama.
This overview is for informational purposes only. We might include some projections, and those should not be relied upon for the purpose of investing. Past performance is not indicative of future results, and any investments we mention are meant for accredited investors only. And any offer can only be considered upon review of a prospectus and relevant offering documentation. So please keep this in mind as we move through this overview, and remember that these are our opinions only.